So good morning, everyone. Glad that you can join us. I'm John Pearson with Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. And on behalf of our team, our CSR team, we welcome you to today's webinar. I'd just like to mention our team members real quickly. So we have on the foundation side, Jennifer Gowdy, Renee Woodside, and Philomena Macklander. Also, our administrator is Robin Cisak, and our community affairs and corporate partnerships are headed up by Bridget Hickey, and also volunteerism and employee engagement activities. So we're a small but mighty team, and get a lot of good stuff done around the state of New Jersey. So again, just want to welcome you. Part of today and part of our kind of efforts moving forward is deeper level of engagement in various engagement activities with our grantees, our community partners. This is a webinar that is going to provide hopefully some good educational opportunities, networking, and collaboration. We have, I think, about 250 organizations and leaders on this call today. So really terrific to have everyone join us. I'd also like to thank the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits, Linda Zippo, for collaborating with us and her team, and Danielle has also been a terrific help. In addition to that, we have a great set of experts on today's panel, really distinguished group of leaders. So I'd like to thank Darrin, Karen, Joe, and Ryan for being part of our webinar. So you're in for a great 55 minutes of interaction and collaboration. So thank you all. Thanks to my team, an excellent job putting this together, and we're looking to do this moving forward. So I'm now going to pass it on to Linda Zippo, President and CEO for the New Jersey Center Nonprofits. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, and thanks to everyone at Horizon and the Horizon Foundation for your strong support of the nonprofit community in New Jersey and of the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits. We're so happy to partner with you on today's webinar and so happy to see so many people joining today. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague, Danielle Robinson, who is working behind the scenes and has been instrumental in setting this up. For those of you who do not know the New Jersey Center for Nonprofits, we are New Jersey's statewide nonprofit network and champion for the charitable community. For 40 years, we've strengthened nonprofits individually and collectively in order to improve the quality of life for all people of our state. We advocate for nonprofits in Trenton and Washington. We conduct research like our annual nonprofit survey reports, which Horizon has supported to track major trends affecting New Jersey's nonprofits. We provide training, education, guidance, workshops, webinars, nonprofit job board, so much more, and our nonprofit help desk, information and referral service, and cost-saving member benefits. One of our signature programs is our annual New Jersey Nonprofit Conference, which convenes more than 500 nonprofit leaders, professional staff, volunteers, and allies to learn, make connections, and be inspired. After 2 years of convening virtually, we will be back in person this year on December 7th. So mark your calendar and stay tuned for more information. And if you'd like to learn more about our programs or if we can be of help to you, please visit our website or contact us. Today's topic, best practices in building and maintaining relationships with funders, is especially timely. In these volatile times, the work of nonprofits in providing essential programs and services and safe spaces for people to come together for community solutions is more important than ever, and never has this been clearer than in the past 2 years. Given the magnitude of the challenges and opportunities we face, strong partnerships are absolutely critical. As nonprofits, we can't do our work without strong relationships with our communities, government leaders, and of course, funding partners. It's no surprise that funding and sustainability consistently rank in our surveys among nonprofit top concerns for their own organizations and the well-being of the nonprofit community as a whole. And funders and nonprofits are exploring how to make these relationships better. At the center, we're proud to be partnering with the Council of New Jersey Grant Makers on a long-term initiative called Doing Good Better. And this is designed to strengthen partnerships and level the power imbalances between funders and nonprofits to advance a thriving, equitable, and resilient New Jersey. Relationships, communication, and mutual respect are at the heart of all of this. So I know you are as excited as I am to hear the insights of today's amazing panel. I'd like to turn it over to our moderator for the discussion today, Renee Woodside, Senior Program Officer for the Horizon Foundation for New Jersey. Renee has been with Horizon for 3 years and oversees grant making in Central New Jersey, as well as the Foundation communication strategy and activities. Prior to coming to Horizon, Renee spent 13 years in the communications department at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, where she led several different training programs helping nonprofits communicate about their work to key audiences. Renee?
Great, thank you so much, Linda. And I echo your thanks to Danielle, who's just been amazing helping us get all this together and promoting it. So I'm very excited to get into the discussion today. And we will have time at the end for questions. So please put those into the Q&A box along the way. And if you would like me to direct your question to any specific panelist, please let me know that. We are also recording the webinar today, and we will send that out that link once we post it. And now I'd like to introduce our panel. I'm going to start with Dr. Darrin Anderson. Darrin is the CEO of the New Jersey YMCA State Alliance and leads a statewide coalition of 31 independent YMCAs focused on statewide initiatives and public policy, service delivery, and strategic partnerships. I'm sure you are all aware of the great work that the Ys are doing in communities. And Darrin oversees all of the statewide fundraising, communications, strategy development, and the operational efficiencies for the State Alliance. So thanks and welcome, Darrin. And then turning on to Joe Finocchiaro, who's Vice President of Development and Marketing for Summit Healthcares. Joe is a creative strategist. He is a fundraising whiz, I've been told, and a special events executive who's raised more than $150 million for nonprofit organizations. He's collaborated with numerous athletes and celebrities and a myriad of corporations to raise money and awareness on a really broad range of issues. And then turning to Ryan Gates. Ryan is PNC Bank's Vice President and Director of Client and Community Relations for New Jersey. He is responsible for leading a team that works directly with PNC's regional president and various lines of business, developing and implementing key regional initiatives, events, and projects. And then he's also responsible for overseeing PNC's local market sponsorships, their philanthropic initiatives, and community relationships in Central and Northern New Jersey, as well as New York City and Connecticut. And then last, but definitely not least, is Karen Meleta, who's Chief Communications Officer at Wakefern Food Corporation. I met Karen yesterday, and boy, does she wear a lot of hats there. She's responsible for Wakefern's communications and reputation management initiatives, including in serving as corporate spokesperson for ShopRite, the Fresh Grocer, and Price Right marketplace stores. And then in addition, she leads its government relations, corporate communications, and their philanthropy and sustainability efforts. And she's responsible for the advancement of ShopRite Partners in Caring, which is ShopRite's hunger fighting initiative. So thank you to all the panelists for joining us today. You'll notice that we've had people representing 2 different types of organizations on the panel today. We thought it would be really helpful for you to hear from both those that are funders and those that are fund seekers, so that we can get both perspectives when it comes to building relationships. So I'm gonna jump in, and I'm gonna start with Karen. Although I think it would be helpful for us to go around and have everyone answer this, just to kind of level set. So my first question is to you, Karen. How would you define stewardship, and what are some of the essential components that you find helpful with relationship building?
So when I think of stewardship, in brief, I would say is using widely what you've been given to work with. And in terms of corporate philanthropy, like most organizations, there's dollars that are set aside for that, and that organizations commit for philanthropy and doing good in their community. And so we want to do that wisely. it's really important that, you know, when we're looking at how we give those dollars, that we're looking to maximize the impact. We want to know that we're working with organizations that share that commitment to, you know, maximizing impact while using the funds wisely and carefully. So, you know, as we work with our nonprofits, what we're looking for is that there is an alignment with the strategies and what we're trying to do as basically a supermarket. That's why our number one focus area of giving is around fighting hunger. It makes a lot of sense. We understand the issue. We have the wherewithal to make a difference and make an impact. And so being a good steward means to us that working with those organizations who can achieve those goals very efficiently and maximize the impact.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. I think from our point of view, we look at it the exact same way. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn to Ryan now. Same question.
So at PNC Bank, personally, I've used stewardship as it's taking care of the community, taking care of something. And so I look at it in twofold. One is, you know, with the community, we've got a responsibility here in this market to give back. You know, Karen spoke of her goals as a supermarket. At PNC, we're really big into early education, that birth through age 5. We do a lot of programming under Grow Up Great. And then we also do a lot under the community development side. And then it's PNC's mission. It's making sure, you know, we're being good stewards to PNC and our mission, because as PNC grows, that's a big focus nationally is adhering to the mission and goals of PNC Bank.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes. Again, very similar to us. We're always looking at the goals, you know, of the enterprise, but then also, you know, we have obviously 2 different sides. We have our foundation and we have our corporate sponsorship. So, but we do fall under the same strategy. And we're, you know, always just looking to maximize the dollars that we have and for the good of the community. So thank you, Ryan. I'm going to turn it over to Darrin. Same question, Darrin.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you for having me. Yeah, you know, if I was able to define stewardship in simple terms, it would be the demographic that we're serving. Are they better off after we've received those resources to bring about the impact or the desired impact? From a organizational perspective, many times we're looking for resources, we're looking for funding to be able to bring about or to implement a program. However, we need to start to look at the impact on how the community felt during the process of our implementation, but after the fact. So stewardship goes both ways. The way that we're utilizing those resources and the intended impact that we're saying we're bringing upon that community or that demographic.
That's great, Darrin. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I see a lot of people coming up in the chat saying that they agree with you too. So that was great. And Joe, I will turn to you next.
Thanks, Renee. Thanks for having me. I mean, Darrin really just stole what I was going to say. It's really just it's showing the impact and us being, you know, from the fundraising perspective, just really showing our impact and that we're good stewards of those dollars. But he said it more eloquently, so I will bow out with his leave it with what he had said.
Great, thanks, Joe. All right, I'm gonna turn over to the funders for a minute, and then I'll come back to the other folks in a second. So, and maybe I'll start with you, Ryan, this time. I would wonder if when you're thinking about, you know, people that have pursued relationships with you in the past, are there advice that you can give to nonprofit partners of things that you prefer or things that you prefer they not do when they're pursuing or trying to pursue a relationship with you, or just over the course of the relationship, that things that you've seen come up that you really prefer or not prefer in the course of those relationships?
So I'll start by saying I come from a unique background where I was, frankly, I was on the sales side for 20 years, where I was calling on organizations to spend dollars. And so I joined PNC a year and a half ago, and now I'm on that other side of the table. And so I'm very mindful of relationships and building those relationships. So I'm always open to introductory calls and talking with people. But what I have found is PNC is very transparent about what the goals and mission are. So for those that are interested in funding from PNC, if you go on our website, it really breaks down the funding focus for PNC. So I encourage people to look at that first, and take a look and see, is there a fit? And I bring up being on the sales side because when I was on the sales side, I did a lot of cold calling back in the day. Now that I'm on the other side and I see how scheduled out my calendar is, sometimes when that call is coming in 2 minutes before I know I'm jumping on a meeting, I can't take it. It's not because I don't want to. It's just I know that I probably cannot engage in that conversation that person's looking for in that time. So cold calling's part of the business, just in general. I get that, but I found that it's easier to reach out and try to establish contact, saying, hey, we're an organization that we feel we're a fit this way. Can we set up a phone call to talk? So for me, being only a year and a half in, it has been a lot of that relationship building from the start.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we as well, we have all our all our priorities up on our website, but sometimes, they can be interpreted a certain way, and people, what I mean? And so we're the same way. We're very, very open to the idea of people reaching out and saying, hey, is this really a fit? Could this really work? And sometimes at first it's not, but we still may build a relationship, and then somewhere down the line, it can become, they have another program and something else becomes a fit. And so that relationship's already built, and then we can do something together. So yeah, I definitely agree. That's always worthwhile. Karen, what about you? I mean, when you think of, do you have any thoughts if you think about an organization that you have a particularly strong relationship? Are there things that you find that, differentiate them, like specific things that differentiate that group from some of your other partners? I know we say we love all our grantees equally, but there sometimes can be ones that really stand out and kind of go above and beyond kind of some of the normal, reporting that we ask for. And I'm just curious if you have additional thoughts on that.
So one of the things that I think is really helpful is when you're either asking for the grant or you're working with an organization, that they do that follow-up and show you the impact. And I started alluding to that earlier, that they follow up, and if it's an event that you could have been attending that you were invited to, or if it's some investment that they've made to increase their capacity, that they share the effect of that with you and show you how they've managed to make impact. And kind of closing the loop, is the best way to describe it, so that you can really understand it, because part of that is telling that story internally and externally. And I think it's a win-win for both organizations, because you want your associates internally to understand what you do, as well as your own customer base, how you're making a difference in the community. So I would say that that's one critical component of it, is really allowing you to understand that impact. And also too, if there's a way of engaging your associates in solving the problem or engaging in the activities of the organization, we're always looking for ways to get our associates involved. So if there is that sort of opportunity, and I realize it doesn't exist with every, what every nonprofit is doing, but whether it's lending expertise, think of other ways beyond funding that can engage people within an organization. And I know that's something at Wakefern, because we're in this supermarket retail space. We lend a lot of technical support to food banks on, warehousing and distribution and other areas that we have knowledge that could support them. And our associates love that, and it really brings it to life. And I think that's critical. And that's when you have that kind of 360 relationship with an organization.
Yeah. I agree with that as well. We have a pretty strong employee engagement program, volunteer program where it's called Horizon Cares. We love to get our Horizon employees out there to see on the ground what these nonprofits are doing. And they find it so rewarding to be able to do that. So yeah, very, very, very much agree with that as well.
Renee,
yeah.
can I echo something on Karen said there?
Absolutely.
Wholeheartedly, as I was preparing for today, I was thinking through that as well. It has been tough over the last year and a half, obviously for everyone, but we've really been trying to get out there and be more engaged with organizations, whether it's existing partners or potential partners, and whether it's a ribbon cutting or the opening of of a new building, and getting our different folks around PNC, our colleagues, engaged in those organizations has been critical. To Karen's point, at PNC, financial literacy is a big component of what we do. And so we loop in our community development team on that financial literacy side. And that's, I just want to establish that's an important part of our foundation work as well. So I just wanted to add on what Karen had said.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you jumped in there. All right, Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know, in your introduction, I talked about you've done a lot of fundraising. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you think some of the things, what are the key components that really have made your fundraising efforts so successful?
I think it's definitely the relationship building. Really finding the right partners that align with your mission, and engaging them. And it's more than just that event. It's really engaging them 365. It's not about selling a sponsorship and not talking to them until next May. It's keeping them involved, showing them the impact from that event, and finding other ways of engaging them through the year, all of which I believe makes that event next year even more successful. So.
And do you think events are like some of the best ways to build those relationships? Is that kind of your number one way of getting started in those types of relationships, or are there other examples that you would give beyond events?
No, I mean, for us, we're Summit Health Care is a little unique. So events are very successful, but because there's our vendors are very interested in our for-profit connections, but I think in the fundraising world, it's definitely about it's about individuals and foundations developing those relationships, strengthening those relationships. That's where there's real impact. I think an event is an entry point for a lot of donors to learn about an organization.
How much follow-up would you say you usually do once you initially made contact, you've gotten somebody's card? Do you check in with them on a monthly basis, on a bi-monthly? How frequently do you usually keep?
I think it really depends. It really depends on the individual. For a period, Summit Healthcare's was on the grant making side, so I've seen that side and the burden that we had. So it's really trying to figure out what the funders interest is. There's those that like that monthly check-in, and those that want to know when there's impact. So that could be quarterly, a couple times a year. I think it's really using your judgment on what the funder's interest is. But it shouldn't be, I think our biggest mistake is one and done. Get that sponsorship and now come back next May and ask for it again.
Right.
Really didn't make the impact.
Yep. That's great. Yeah. And Darrin, so turning to you, Darrin, I know you're all around the place again, and the Y is in pretty much every community in New Jersey, and I see you bouncing around the state like crazy. So I know you talk to a lot of funders, and I'm curious because I know I only see things from the funder's point of view, and so I'm wondering, are there things that you think funders should know that would be helpful for you? So in other words, what kinds of things can funders do to help open the door for the relationship to be built?
Yeah, no, I think first and foremost, having that approachability and being open to having any level of conversation that's needed. You know, I think the days are long gone for when we were funded and we saw that we were not making the impact or what we said that we would do, or the outcomes are not there. Rather than waiting, if you received a 12-month grant and you're going to wait to December to disclose that to the funders, those days are gone. Immediately, at least what we do from the State Alliance perspective is that if we see where our funding or the outcomes that we intended does not look like it's going to come to fruition, we begin communicating up front. We may need to co-create a course correction or some changes so that intended consequence can still happen, or if not, there can be a byproduct of something beneficial that can come out of that. So I would say that, you know, being open to failure, the number one. Number two, how do you kind of redeploy failure in such a way that you're going to bring about the impact that's desired and that's needed, especially at the community level or whatever demographic that you're looking to impact. And I think a level of transparency, both directions. It's got to be bi-directional. If, once again, if you're not going to be able to do what you said you're going to do, for whatever reasons, there's so many extraneous reasons that are out there. You need to communicate that up sooner rather than later. And also at the same time, the funder, we want you to be transparent that if you there's something instinctive or intuitive that you feel that's not happening, ask those questions. We got to be ready to be accountable. And I think accountability goes both directions.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That is a very good point. And one of the things you touched on too, just how sometimes things can change. So what might have been planned when the initial application was put in and the initial grant went into place may not be able to happen. And we saw that obviously firsthand with COVID, right? A lot of programs had to shift gears, move to something else. And so I know we were really open to being flexible with that. But it was a very challenging time. And Karen, I'm going to turn to you now for this question. I know that obviously Wakefern, for them, it must have been particularly challenging, especially, the fact that you had a lot of frontline workers working in your stores. But I'm wondering when it came to the relationships that you built in the community, were there unique opportunities or things that you put into place when the pandemic kind of hit that really actually helped enhance relationship building or helped you engage with the community and with the folks that you were helping?
Well, I have to say, with the incredible amounts of job loss that happened during the pandemic, what we were doing with supporting our regional food banks and local food banks, food pantries, shelters, became more relevant than ever before. Hunger in particular is one of these issues that are often hidden in our area where our stores are located. So it's hard to get people, to understand the issue or focus on it. But I think it became so apparent with the incredible amounts of job loss that occurred. So we stepped up our funding of food banks. We didn't pull back. In fact, we, reached out and said, how can we help? What do you need? Supply chain challenges started creeping in. And obviously, you saw that in the stores. It was difficult to get certain items at certain periods of time. So, we had open and constant communication with our food banks in terms of what was needed, how can we support them. And, one of our programs, the ShopRite Partners in Caring program, works a specific way. It actually offsets the shared handling costs for small food banks and pantries because they pay a fee when they work with the regional food banks. It's just a shared handling cost. So our program specifically offsets that cost. Well, during the pandemic, all the food banks waived that. So, talking about being transparent, Darrin, the food banks came to us and said, hey, we're not charging a shared handling cost. Let's work together. And we were happy to do that on how to repurpose those funds to make sure they continue to work for those food pantries. But obviously we had to change the way our program worked. Yeah. And we were flexible and able to do that. So that was one of the outcomes of that pandemic that I would say, we continue to always be open to see how can we best support the organizations that we're supporting. And if it needs to be flexible and change from time to time, that's okay. But when that transparency and honesty is there, we can work together to make it happen.
Yep, I totally agree. We had a similar situation where we really just had to have the conversations with all our nonprofits and find out, you know, what their needs were, what they were finding the needs were in the community. How can we align, you know, with all of that and figure out how to be flexible, reallocate funds so that we were serving communities best. And Ryan, I'm guessing this probably also was something that that happened for you all. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I was thinking as Darrin spoke, we've definitely hit some of those situations where we get to the end of the funding cycle and we hear from the organization that they had struggles reaching their outcomes. And so, you know, with that, we just, you know, we encourage that two-way communication and that transparency. We do not want to give funding. We don't want to take funding back. You know, that's the last thing we want to do as an organization. So we had a lot of conversations over this last year and a half with different organizations of, okay, how can we repurpose the funds? Let's brainstorm. Are there different ideas? And then, you know, to what Karen said, we did a lot with the education centers on pivoting to, you know, virtual events with the kids, because a lot of what PNC does is in these centers and with the kids. And obviously we couldn't do that during the pandemic. And one specifically was we had a safari with a handful of schools in the area, and it was we had this neat video that went with it, and the kids, we sent them all binoculars, and that's something that we probably would have never gone down the route of pre-COVID, but allowed us to pivot, to get in front of the kids, come up with a program that's educational. And what's good is we've been able to take these programs that have been successful at some of these educational centers and bring them to other centers that were struggling to come up with ideas for programs there. So we've definitely seen a lot of that over the last year and a half that I've been there, and obviously 2+ years of the pandemic.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that for a second, you know, when all these organizations had to cancel their events, and those events were major funding sources for them, you know, to just say, well, you're not holding the event, so we're not going to fund you. Being able to pivot and find a way to still, you know, get them a grant, whether the event was happening or not. Or, you know, that first year, virtual, we hadn't figured out virtual as well as we, you know, figured it out year 2. But
Right.
so I think that's an important thing to consider as well as a funder.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. I know that was very challenging for a lot of folks because, you know, galas and events and things like that just weren't happening. And so, you know, we had to do the same thing and be flexible with those folks and figure out other ways. So I'm going to turn back over to Darrin and Joe. We've talked a lot about impact and how I think it's a really, really good way showing how, you know, you're having an impact in the community is really, really a great way to build a relationship, I think, and keep a relationship going with a funder. And so I'm curious if you can both talk about, and Darrin, I'll start with you, if you can talk about how your organization looks at and measures impact, and then how do you communicate that and demonstrate that, you know, both to your funders, but also, you know, you can talk more broadly just to your audiences in general.
Well, I think it's twofold. First of all, you can't change what you don't measure. So if you don't have metrics, if you don't have performance objectives, if you don't have indicators in play to let you know that you're doing a good job or you're having some level of success, you know, I think that's problematic. But I believe that success indicators, once again, there's this duality and accountability. There's success indicators for the funder. There's also should be success indicators for the community. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is that the community should have a stake in whatever program or services that's been provided, and they should be at the table as a valuable partner. And so those are essentially extremely important, and that helps to build camaraderie, transparency, and build that relationship to the level where you can continue to have a multi-layer and multi-year impact.
Great, thanks, Darrin. And Joe, I'll ask you the same question.
I think for us, it's at Summit Healthcare is a couple ways we do it. We have a program called Food, Health, and Hope in partnership with the Community Food Bank that Horizon has been a supporter over the years. Our indicators are we do an evaluation, outside evaluator that interacts with all stakeholders. I think that is key. We get some great results, and then we also engage. Also, our participants do evaluation, and there's outcome from them. You know, obviously, in the health world, where is there changes in their health, whether it be weight loss, nutrition, things of that nature. Do they have behavioral changes? So we track all that, we quantify that. That for this program is a great indicator.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna go around again. I'd love to. We're getting close to Q&A time. I'm gonna do one more question. I think that you could all answer. And it'll be two different perspectives, and that's what I love about this. I'm just wondering, I know we talked before, about the specific kind of criteria, and we have our funding priorities, and those are obviously things that you're going to look at to make sure that there's an alignment with anyone you're making, you want to build a relationship with. But can you talk about, are there other attributes of an organization that are really important to you? So, I think that who an organization is and what they stand for is maybe one example of that, but are there other things that you would say when you're looking to partner with someone, you really want to make sure that they have some of these attributes? And I'll start with you again, Karen.
So we have over 300 stores in 9 states, and they're independently owned and operated. We're a cooperative. So for us, we have what we call small grants and large grants, and a lot of our stores really try to give as broadly as possible to impact the community. Everything from the Little League to the Boy Scouts to the PBAs, they really try to be far-reaching. But when we look at the larger grants and the focus area of giving, we really are focused on that the organization we're donating to has the capacity and the infrastructure in place to deliver on their mission and deliver on their promise. Often there are organizations that are very new, they're just starting out, they come for very large grants. And then when you look at how are you going to implement that, you find the infrastructure is not there. So while the mission may be really great, and the passion of the people there is fabulous, and we don't give grants to anyone who's less than a year as a nonprofit, has been acting and operating less than a year. But that those early stages, you want to make sure that it's a reasonable, rational growth trajectory, that they can accomplish what they're setting out to do, and they really do have the staff in place and infrastructure, and just the financial accountability and all those systems in place to make sure that the right thing is being done with the funds.
And Renee, can I chime in?
Absolutely.
Right after Karen? And I think that is extremely important. I mean, getting grants and dollars for services and programs is one thing, but one of the biggest fears and what keeps nonprofit execs up at night is sustainability of their organization. The reason why nonprofits exist is to lessen the burden for government. So our job is to help to address social complexing problems in our community, because we interface with the demographics, we have that trust, and we have partnership. And many times government cannot necessarily do that. But if we don't have sustainability of this sector, of the nonprofit sector, we've seen how vitally important that nonprofits are, especially with COVID relief and COVID recovery. So part of the program, the priority should not only be the services and the programs, but how can we help to build the capacity and the infrastructure of these organizations so they can continue to be a resource in the community.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Darrin. Thank you. Brian or Joe, do you want to jump in?
I can jump in there. Really a lot of what Karen and Darrin just said right there in terms of, now I just can't believe I just lost my train of thought there as I jumped in. But yep, completely lost my train of thought.
I've been there.
Capacity
Um,
building, Ryan, let me help
Does it
you.
really?
Capacity. Thank you. Actually, no, that brings me back. So what Karen was saying in terms of organizations that are less than a year old, I'd say one of the biggest struggles I find is we are approached by so many worthwhile organizations that are doing great things across the communities, across the communities we support. And if I've learned anything, I kind of joke that PNC's we're never first to the party. And because of that, we are looking for those established organizations that have been around, that have the capacity, have the staff, because we are looking to build that longer term relationship. So Karen, thank you for the assist there. I knew it would come back, but so we're very similar in that sense as well in terms of how we evaluate organizations, and it's tough. I mean, the organizations are constrained right now. We're constrained right now, and it's I kind of in some ways view it as a puzzle. We're trying to we want to do right by the marketplace and by the community, and it's trying to take those resources and do the best work we can and maximize those resources and look for those programs that can have the most I'd say broad-based impact out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. And I think as funders, it is important for us to think about the capacity piece also and how we can help with that. And so I know we're often trying to think about, what kind of support we can give beyond the grant award. And that also often opens up doors and ways for us to keep the relationship strong. And it helps to also give them an opportunity to, show what they've got, so to speak. So yeah, thank you. And Joe, I'll let you have the last word on this.
I think I think you guys have covered it. I mean, I agree with what Ryan just said, and I think Darrin, from my perspective, brought it home again.
Okay, great. So then, you know what, I'll start turning to questions then from our audience. I am starting to get a few here. So I'll start with this one. So besides the standard stewardship practices, so emails with updates, invitations to events, annual reports, progress reports, all that kind of stuff, to nurture and maintain a relationship with a donor, are there any like specific tips anybody can share? So I think I kind of asked this a little bit earlier, but if there's any specific tips that you have around being able to keep that relationship going, other than kind of the normal stuff that we do, I guess.
If I could, I want to throw an outside the box one we received. It was an educational center that was doing a music program in the community, and this isn't obviously going to apply to a lot of people on the call, but they, rather than an email with this is the program or a write up, they created a video, and it was phenomenal to show the work they did with the children, how engaged the children were, and it was something we shared internally because it was so unique, and it just showed what an impact that funding had made for that educational center and the program they were working on. And as I said, I understand that is not going to be a fit for a lot of folks on this call, but it was outside the box from what we normally see. And it was impactful to us because we were able to show our colleagues internally, like this is an impact that we're making in the community.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Video really has become, I think, a great way to illustrate what you're doing and the impact you're having. And I think that's a great example. Does anybody else have any tips there?
I do, Renee, and I was kind of preparing for today's webinar and trying to have an Oprah or maybe a Dr. Phil moment. I pulled out what are some of the things that can be done that can be disastrous to a relationship? And then what come up was, top 3 things that, kind of sever relationships or separate or maybe divorce. Communication is number 1. So Ryan just mentioned, you don't have to communicate in the traditional ways where you're just sending emails or maybe phone calls. You can send videos. There's social media. There's webinars where you can bring those that have been impacted by your program to the table so the funder can see that. Number 2, we talked about stewardship already, but financial accountability. Funders want to know that what you're doing with those resources are said, what you're going to do in your proposal narrative. But also nonprofits want to know that, is this a 1-year commitment or is this a multi-year commitment? Because that changes our perspective and that changes our approach. If we recognize that if we do have some mishaps in year number 1, would it be funding in year number 2? Because the last thing we want to do is build our capacity, and the next year we have to let that capacity go. So multi-year relationships and multi-years of funding is crucial for organizations. And then last but not least, it's the same thing with fidelity and commitment. If are entering to a partnership, there needs to be a commitment there and some fidelity.
So that's funny that you just brought that up, because I'm actually looking at another question in the Q&A right now. Were you peeking? Were you peeking at the Are we peeking at the Q&A? Because I'll switch over to Karen and Ryan, I think, to answer this one. And the question, they're basically, it's the same thing. They're talking about how impact and sustainable change, it can take time to establish. And so how can organizations really show or encourage funders to fund them for longer, or to commit to longer funding, since it's not guaranteed that it will be offered again or renewed, since typically a lot of folks are funding 1-year grants. And so I'm just curious if you have thoughts on that.
Happy to jump in.
Yeah.
For us, we actually are looking long term, because today, every once in a while there's either a disaster or a situation that occurs, and an emergency grant or a one-time grant is an appropriate thing to do. But when you're really trying to make impact in a community, having that long-term outlook is really what you're looking for. But I think it's critical that if you're going to ask for a 5-year commitment, and we do that often, 3-year, 5-year, that you're laying how you're going to get there and achieve that. And you have, I'm going to call it a business plan, because if you were going to go to anyone else and ask for a loan, or you want to show that you have the capacity to do and accomplish what you're going to say you're going to accomplish. So showing what you're going to do year 1, year 2, year 3, and that plan, if it's a capacity building plan, if it's, to expand the staff to have broader outreach, how are you going to go about impacting the service area where you're going to serve. So truly, being able to see that and see the plan, and it should be a written plan. It's not enough just to articulate it in a meeting, but being able to hand someone a document to show this is what where will be year 1, year 2, etc., is necessary if you want long-term funding.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? I know sometimes when you're getting off the ground with the project, there's obviously some planning pieces that have to kind of get in place. But I agree with you that I think trying to look as long-term as they can, so that we have an idea of what's to come, and whether or not that investment is going to make sense for us, I think is really important. So thanks for that. All right, so we've got a few more questions here. So here's a pretty simple one. What do you find is the best way to make initial contact with a potential partner? I know we talked a little bit about this before with Joe, and I know events are usually a good, stepping stone. But outside of the scope of maybe just an event or putting in an application for a grant, what is the best way to make initial contact? And are you, I know we talked a little bit about this too, are folks here open to introductory calls?
I'll jump in on that, because I touched upon it briefly at the start. I'm definitely open to introductory calls, and part of it for me is, even after, I've probably said it ad nauseum, 1.5 years of PNC, I'm still learning. I'm still learning PNC. I'm still learning the community, all the organizations, and I think my biggest thing is just, I also asked the organization just to look at what that funding focus is. And Renee, you said it best, just because it's written out, there's gray area, so that's the understanding of setting up that introductory call to see if there is truly a fit. And so, we have a lot of those calls, and some of them, it progresses to where they're putting an application or it's a charitable sponsorship, and some through conversation, we just realize it's not a fit at this time, but it goes back to building that relationship, because you don't know when down the road there might be a program, there might be an opportunity that is a better fit for funding.
Yep. Yeah. And we talked a little bit about that before. You're right. I think, and I have another person here asking this question about getting the foot in the door also, and how, some funders want, fiscal year information and audits and revenue information. But if you're just getting started and you're brand new, how do you comply with that when you don't really have that information yet? And I think that that's really key, is that initially, you're going to want to try to find funders, I think, that are going to want to invest in new programs. Some will and some won't. And I know that can be tricky, but it's really about going around, I think, and building the relationship and finding out who are the people that would love to, to make those initial investments that get a nonprofit really going off the ground. I know we've done it in the past, and there are funders that are open to that.
If I could just respond to that, I think, if you're really in the early stages, think about personal donations rather than going to corporate funders, because corporate funders have a whole other level of accountability with the funds they donate, which is why you'll see us say things like you have to be in operation for more than a year, you have to file, financial 990s. We have to be accountable with the money that we're spending. So there's that whole level of reporting that's important, that we understand. So think about personal contributions from a network and individual donors in those early stages to get you off the ground. Is just a thought I have. But I wanted to mention something else about that first connection. And this is just an interesting phenomenon with email these days. It is so difficult for email to get through to people with spam filters. In our organization, we are indoctrinated to never click on anything. And I'm sure I see Ryan shaking his head. It's just something that we absolutely cannot do. So that phone call or that note that you send us by mail is a good way of us knowing you're real, and maybe then we can click on that email, open that email. But it's difficult these days, and I ask you to keep that in mind, because I don't click on anything. I can't.
I'll echo what Karen said. If it's an attachment, if it's a link, I mean, we're unless it's someone we know, we don't touch it.
We hit the delete button.
Renee, if I may, so I think what I'm hearing Karen and Ryan saying is that I realize that we are in this new virtual world given COVID, and hopefully that things are returning back to a new normal. I think there's something to be said about the human interaction, just getting out and meeting people and communicating with people and going places where funders will go. Most of us have banks. Most of us go in to our banks, and just stopping by and just speaking with the branch manager or just having that conversation can go a long way. So getting back to the roots of how we used to raise money 20 and 25 and 30 years ago is building those individual relationships and making sure that their relationship is not just based on funding, it's based on personality. I mean, Jonathan Pearson, me and him talk on a regular basis. I ask how his children are doing. He asks how my children are doing. I ask what's happening in his community. He's asking what's happening in my community. That's independent of our funding relationship. So we need to get back to interacting with one another like we're human beings again.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Darrin. I think, getting to the root of it, it's just like any other relationship, right? that you have in your life. You want to have a good rapport and just, really care, I guess is the key thing, right? If we care about each other and we care about what's going on in the communities that we're serving, then it just kind of can flow from there, right? All right, so I've got a couple more questions here before we wrap things up. I have a question around recognition for levels of gifts. So I think what this person's getting to is they're asking, when it comes to, if you're giving a gift, you're giving, to your, whether it's a grant or possibly a sponsorship, what do funders really feel is meaningful when being recognized for those different gifts? Well, I think Karen or Ryan, you could probably answer this. I don't know, Darrin, if you've run into this and how, I know you probably do a lot of this as well on your end.
I'd say on the foundation side, it's less about the recognition. It's more about the work that's being done in the community. And don't get me wrong, we were at a ribbon cutting last week for a project that we underwrote, and they put a plaque up, and that's great. That's great recognition, but that's not why we're there. We're there because the program is going to have an impact in the community we were in, and that's what, from a foundation standpoint, that's truly what that funding's about. Now, when you're talking charitable sponsorship, then it's different. When we're going down that way, it's, is there an ad, is there a table, is there signage at the event? But that's a different that's a different part over there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. The same thing. A sponsorship event is one thing. There's a certain expectation, but a general grant, not so much. But I think funders are just people like anybody else. And if there's an opportunity to thank them, if you're out at an event or public and someone's present, just recognizing someone, especially if it's a relationship that you've been in with a long time, you're there year after year. I think saying thank you is a simple thing. I mean, we support 2,500 pantries, and I would say a good 50% of them write us handwritten notes to these little small organizations in these communities. And there's someone, and they get these small grants too, and there's someone who writes a handwritten note that just says, we were able to do this. And we save them. We share them, we circulate them. You'd think it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal because everybody here who works really hard to make sure that this program continues year after year, when they get those little handwritten notes and somebody says something in there, we share them here. It's meaningful. It matters to us. I think everyone wants that, to feel that impact and know that they're doing good.
Yeah, I agree. I keep all the handwritten notes that I get as well. It is a very nice personal touch. And I do agree that is nice. It's something just as simple as that, right? And
even if I could say, even when it's a form letter, the fact when someone who's writing the letter writes a little handwritten note on it.
Yeah.
Huge ad. Huge.
Huge ad, yeah. So this isn't really a question, but I'll maybe pose it as a question. So someone is just mentioning about the fact that when they make a grant request and it's declined, that it would be helpful to receive feedback. And I know that sometimes organizations, after they've been declined, they'll reach out to me, they'll reach out to us, and I will follow up with them with feedback. And I'm curious if others on the call, whether on either side. So, Ryan and Karen, do you give feedback, when you have to decline folks? And Darrin and Joe, do you find on your side that that's common, or that you really, that it's hard to get feedback?
I'll answer from my end. If someone reaches back out afterwards, I'm more than happy to provide that feedback. And I think part of it is spending 20 years on the sales side. I heard no a lot, and sometimes you would never even hear no. You would just never hear again. And so I find that at the very least, be able to close the loop. Was it a question of fit? Was it a question of constraints? And at least have that conversation with the organization, just to give them the best, the best feedback that we've got in that moment. I'm more than happy to do so.
Great, thanks.
And I would say we try as well, but sometimes the sheer volume of requests we get, close to 2,000 a year. And we're a small team,
Mm-hmm.
so it's challenging to to go in depth with every organization as to why you're unable to fund them.
Right.
We
yeah.
try as best we can, especially if they're ones that we've had a previous relationship with, which we're not able to support them this year.
Yes. Yeah, I understand.
And I would agree as well, Renee, as a nonprofit organization, getting that feedback is vitally important for us because it allows us to build upon the next grant opportunity. That if there was something that was left out, there was something that was unclear, that was nebulous, getting that information back truly can contribute to the sustainability of an organization.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Darrin. All right, so we're just coming up against time. I wanna thank the panelists, and I want to just thank everyone for all the questions they submitted, and I'm gonna turn it over to Philomena to wrap things up for us.
Thanks, Renee. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to finish off really quickly with just a couple of announcements. Horizon and the Center for Nonprofits, we're planning additional webinars that will keep you informed about future topics and the dates. We ask that you fill out the survey so that we could get feedback and improve future meetings. We would love suggestions on topics. So the survey link is in the chat, so please fill it out. This webinar was recorded and will be provided to you by tomorrow. And then lastly, on behalf of Horizon, I want to thank the panelists once again for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you to the Center for Nonprofits for co-hosting this meeting with us. And Danielle in particular for making it happen. You're amazing. And thank all of you for joining us. Until next time.